what I'm really excited about tonight is introducing one of our panelists, which will be doing the fireside chat, Dana Hooper. He's been our executive director since 2007, and he's also been a force in this community, in the IDD community. He's been with LSA for the past 16 years, but his journey hasn't started there. His journey started many years ago when his son Brent was diagnosed with an intellectual disability. Over the years, he's become more involved in many areas of the IDD world. He became a leader in our community, working with the government and nonprofits such as Brent Services, where he's now on the board. He's also a past board president of Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and he's on the State Department of Developmental Services and this task force, and a past board president of the San Andreas Regional Center, where his son, Brent, is a client in supported living. It also led him to his leadership role at LSA, where he can make a difference every day in the lives of individuals LSA serves. Dana, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Hadia. Of course, I'm very excited to be here, and we have an incredible guest, Heidi Cartan, joining us tonight, and I get the pleasure of introducing her. Heidi is the founder and executive director of Common Roots Farm, an inclusive urban farm in Santa Cruz, California, established in 2016. She has a background in human services and a passion for gardening. Heidi was driven to create this unique space after experiencing firsthand the lack of opportunities for her son, Noah, who has cerebral palsy, once he graduated from high school. Determined to provide meaningful and fulfilling activities for Noah and others with intellectual and physical disabilities, Heidi and her husband, Philippe Habib, built Common Roots Farm. Heidi's dedication to fostering an inclusive environment where people with disabilities are recognized for their abilities and their contributions has transformed Common Roots Farm into a model of community engagement and sustainable agriculture. Her vision ensures that everyone, regardless of ability, can participate in growing healthy food and building a supportive, interconnected community.
Thank you, Dana. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you for being here. We're going to start the Q&A portion of tonight's agenda, where I'll ask the questions, and Heidi will share her great insights with us. Heidi, to begin with, I know we're focusing on Common Roots Farm tonight, but that's really not the whole story, is it? My understanding is there's really two parts. The farm and then Coastal Haven. I wondered if you could kind of give us an overview of what they are and how they operate.
Sure, you bet. Well, thank you again for the chance to talk about this. I think as a parent, as parents, my husband and I both appreciate the chance to share what we've learned and what we've done. And we particularly are proud of having joined with other parents to do this particular venture. So about 8 years ago now, 7 or 8 years ago, about 10 families came together, all of us raising adult children with intellectual or developmental disabilities. We came together and purchased a almost 7-acre property very close to downtown Santa Cruz, and it happened to be the largest remaining agricultural parcel within the city limits. And our vision was really to create lifelong housing for our adult children that would, of course, outlast us and hopefully last for generations of people with disabilities, but also to create a working farm, small-scale agriculture where they could have opportunities, if they so chose, to be able to participate, as you mentioned, in growing healthy food, and in our case, also beautiful flowers, and having a place as adults to hang out and be together. and hopefully have a good life and meaning and purpose. So fast forward now, we've had about almost 3 years now of our residents, our adult children, living here in what we call a pocket neighborhood. So we built 9 homes and a common garage and guest unit. And 6 of our 9 homes are occupied by our adult children. And 3 of the homes, we have a home that's rented to a family. We have a couple homes that are rented to UCSC students. And then our children are the primary tenants and the reason that our project exists. And then adjacent to the housing community, with no fences separating them, is about a 4.5-acre parcel, and that is where Common Roots Farm is. So it's essentially the front yard, if you will, of the folks who are living in our pocket neighborhood, but it's also open and has been intended to be available as a larger community resource here in Santa Cruz for anybody with an intellectual or developmental disability who would like to participate, as well as people without disabilities. You know, our mission is to bring those 2 groups together to farm this land. So that's the sort of the overall
Well,
picture of
fantastic. What an achievement. I guess maybe just back up just a little bit. So, I mean, what challenges did you face when transitioning Noah from high school into adulthood? And because this seems like it led to this.
It absolutely did. Yes, there's no talking about this project without talking about our Noah. Noah is our oldest son, so he's 28 now. And as you mentioned in the intro, he has cerebral palsy. He's actually a quadriplegic, so he's a wheelchair user. He does require a feeding tube for nutrition, and he's nonverbal. He's extraordinarily social. He really loves to be with people and is, just a happy person in general, but he has substantial needs. And so it wasn't entirely clear, to be honest, early in his life, if he would have a full lifespan. But as he got older and more medically stable, it became clear to us that there was, we continued to hope, a very high chance at that point that he would have a full life. And we began to really think hard about what was that going to look like every other parent I know in our shoes. You know, we all worry about what's going to happen when we're not here to provide the care and support that we've been providing as parents and as a family. But it was also really important to me. My background was actually in geriatric social work, and I had spent my career prior to having Noah, and even after he was born, working toward community-based solutions to nursing home level care for older adults. And so I was very aware of skilled nursing level support for people like Noah as they were older, but I did not see a lot of options available to him with his peer group. And of course, folks like Noah are not, that's not a common disability to be at that level, but there are certainly plenty of Noahs in the world. And that became more and more my and my husband's social circle, and our experience in the education system and what have you was with other parents in our situation. And so it really mattered to us. I kind of had a little bit of a view of what was ahead with institutional care, but that was typically supporting people 80 plus. And I wasn't really sure what was, going to be available to Noah. And because he has so many physical needs, it was really critical to me that we find something that would support him adequately, but also really, I say often, how do you create a meaningful day and a meaningful life when you have that level of disability? And it's completely doable. I see families and parents and educators and therapists and so forth coming together and doing it every day, but it's not straightforward and simple. And so our solution to that, there are many, but our solution was to create a working farm and really thinking about, there are so many jobs that need to be done on a farm. And if your objective is not to do it quickly and to be super efficient about it, but to be inclusive, there are many ways to adapt those jobs and those activities, so that people with even significant physical impairments like my son can be involved. And so his journey is really the journey, that led to this.
Well, wow, it certainly sounds like Noah is what inspired, this.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about, uh, the 8 years and how things evolved. I mean, did you have a picture of today in your mind 8 years ago?
Interestingly, we did. I mean, it certainly has changed a bit, but we really did have a pretty, we did a lot of homework in advance. We didn't know it would take us that long. We were quite naive about that. And it's probably better that we didn't know what we didn't know at the time, because the project itself, we were involved in building when the pandemic hit. We also had the CZU Lightning Complex fire happen here in Santa Cruz within 5 or 6 miles of our property while we were under construction. And we had a number of things that were challenges to us going forward. But we did have the vision of the housing and the farm, and we did have the vision of two separate entities that would be part of one cohesive whole as an experience. And we did have a vision of the farm being a community asset and not just being available to folks who were able to live at Coastal Haven. We wanted it to serve them too, but we really wanted to bring the community here so that many more people could enjoy the farm, but also our children who are living here would have some built-in networks and social opportunities, because the farm could be a community hub, which we're beginning to see. And so that part of the vision was certainly there, but it took a while. It took a lot of patience on the part of our family partners, and it took a lot of perseverance, particularly on the part of my husband, to get the construction done. I had the fun part, which was the farm, but he's responsible for having gotten the neighborhood built.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So if you wanted to visit the farm, I mean, um, get involved, volunteer, I don't know what all the possibilities are. How would you do that?
Well, best thing would be to just go to our website, commonrootsfarm.org. We're open, 5 days a week, and we do hold a couple of volunteer sessions pretty much every other Saturday on the weekends to accommodate folks who can't get here during the week. But we're a small operation. If you send an email, I'm likely to get it and respond. And we love to have visitors. We give tours. And it's also a chance to see, for people who are interested in sustainable agriculture, it is an opportunity to see what's called a diversified market farm. This is a beautiful time of year to come because we're at peak season. And we've got about 20 different, food crops and at least as many cut flowers growing. But the best way is really to go through the website and, set aside a time to come visit.
Well, fantastic. And how about Coastal Haven? If if I wanted my son to live there,
Right.
what would I do? What's I guess the bird's eye view of that?
Sure. Well, the first step really would be similar, a separate organization, as we mentioned, but you would go to it's kind of a long website, but Coastal Haven Families LLC.com. And we offer monthly tours first Saturday of every month. And so step one really is to come and see the project and the housing and the property and get initial questions answered. That's when we really get a chance to walk through the community and the neighborhood and really talk about the design features and how we go about accepting members. So it is a private equity model, an LLC model. And so there's a lot to learn about how that works, but the best thing is really to come see us and take a look at it. And then if, folks who are interested beyond that initial tour, then we hook you up with some of our family partners who make themselves available for lots of Q&A and really have, give people a chance to meet other members of the community and start to get to know us.
Fantastic. I bet there's a lot of success stories over those years. Can you share a couple maybe?
Oh, sure. Well, thank you. Yeah, we've been, because we're a working farm and not a special needs farm, we've been able to employ young adults with IDD through an internship program that the state actually funds. And so we have a couple of different employees we've had on the farm who that have had the farm work as their first paid job, and they are doing groundskeeping work, farming work, animal care, various things here. But it's been exciting to watch them blossom and learn, real skills for employment. But also, we have one young man who refuses direct deposit on his paycheck because he really enjoys the process of going to the bank and depositing his paycheck every couple of weeks, and takes a lot of pride in that. But we also have 3 different day programs coming to the farm on 3 different mornings of the week. And what I'm especially proud of, because when we got here, there was no day program that could serve our son. Wouldn't take him because of his feeding tube, but we also just still don't really have enough day programs for the demand. But we've got programs who are coming to the farm and having the opportunity to be in nature, bring their staff, be able to participate throughout the season in the farm and what we're growing, whether it's tasting food, caring for plants, interacting with our animals. And I feel like that's a big success story, because we get calls in the winter because we don't have year-round space yet. We're looking to build a barn this year, but we have to send folks home when the weather gets poor, and to come back in the spring. And we do get calls from those day programs saying our participants are eager to come back. When are you reopening? So I'm looking forward to the day when we don't have to say we're sending you home. We can just, take a holiday break and reopen. So that feels good.
That's great. So, yeah, I mean, you may have answered this, but I mean, how do you foster inclusion and socialization?
Well, I think Dana, we've all, we've all been had experiences that are working well, and we've also had experiences that didn't work well. And I think for us at Common Roots, the first step was really to create an infrastructure that was wheelchair accessible. If you're going to say you're welcoming everybody, everybody has to be able to get in and get around. So that was step one for us, right? But
Yes.
but simultaneously, yeah, we really wanted, it's a high priority for us to create a culture of inclusion. And so we train staff, we train volunteers in the importance of allowing people to be who they are, and allowing people to feel welcome. So, I have parents who visit and frequently begin to apologize for their child's behaviors or sounds, or or various inattentiveness to whatever we're talking about. And I like to say over and over again, this is the one place where you don't have to apologize for that. We get it here. This is who we're here, to work with and to participate with. And those relationships are really mutual. We have volunteers who don't have disabilities who speak to me about how much it means to them to be able to be here and to get, whether it's out of their office or out of their home and into a natural setting and learn how to grow food. But it's also, I think some of the best inclusion just happens when everybody's in the same space and they're sharing tasks. So if you're going to harvest tomatoes, you can make that a 2-person task with someone like my son, and he can't harvest, but he can hold the harvest tote, and he can be right next to another farmer and participating and making that activity work. And so we don't rush people. We're not in a hurry. It's not about efficiency. It's really about adaptation. And we've created some space for wheelchair accessible, roll into garden beds. We've got lots of different size tools. We've got potting tables at different heights to accommodate people of different heights themselves, and lots of different ways to approach what we do. And then we also just say, if your jam is just to walk around the farm and listen to the birds and look at what there is to see, or take in the smells, the sounds, you're welcome to do that too. It doesn't have to be about farming. We also do a cooking class. We have an art class. It's about being in a space together and enjoying that space. And for me, a high priority placed on a natural setting, an environment that's just naturally beautiful because it's outside.
Well, it sounds like you've created an amazing community. And
On it.
this must have, you know, tremendous positive impact on everyone. Can you give us some examples, or, you know, again, maybe this is to ask if there's some other stories there. Um, Sounds like you put smiles on a lot of people.
Well, I think so. You know, this year we expanded, thanks to a grant from the Miranda Lux Foundation, we were able to expand the number of students coming to us from post-secondary programs. So, you know, as you mentioned, my inspiration and my husband's motivation was, what is Noah's adulthood going to look like? What happens to him after he's out of post-secondary education? And if his life is indeed long, what fills his time? And we've been able to work with post-secondary students who often come to us with very little confidence in, you know, being out in the world. They've been in a school environment, they've been supported in that environment, but they haven't really been in an employment setting. And many of them have not been on a farm. And so it's been really fun to watch them, you know, build their confidence interacting with our animals. For example, we have some sheep. They're trained to be able to be on a leash. We talk about rotational grazing and lots of the practices on a farm that are important, you know, for farming. But we also, you know, give them opportunities to do what we like to call seed to salad. So learning how to plant seeds, how to what needs to be done to germinate them, how to care for them, how to transplant them. They really get the opportunity through a season with us to go the whole way, you know, from seed to salad, and be able to take products home, be able to take flowers home. And they love it. And I think the biggest mark of success really is that I have teachers asking if the students, you know, students are asking to come back and do a second, and even sometimes a third year on the farm. And I have more of those programs post-secondary looking for sites like ours, employment settings that really do support and work. You know, we've had a student who's blind, we've had a number of people who use wheelchairs, and we've had people on the spectrum. You know, we've really seen the diversity of human experience around disability here. And we've yet to, you know, it doesn't work perfectly all the time, but we have an attitude of can do. You know, we have an expectation that people are competent, and we learn together. And that environment seems to be really helping young adults thrive as they head toward their adulthood. And so that it feels like we're onto something here in this setting with that happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, how can parents, you know, advocate for something like this in their own local area? Because I'm guessing that, you know, you made the commitment to Santa Cruz, lock, stock, and barrel.
Oh, we did, that's right. Well, you know, I've seen we're not the only one to be doing this around the country. Certainly there's research and resources available, but I think, you know, a lot of communities have community gardens, and there are some basic things that can be done in those community gardens to include everyone. And I would say that's a place to start if this, you know, if this kind of endeavor interests you. Get some experience yourself doing it, bringing your child with you to do it together. You know, Noah and I started out really by gardening in our backyard because it was my hobby and I didn't want to give it up in the course of caring for him. And so, you know, I figured out ways that he could participate, what he could and couldn't do with me. And so I think getting to know your child in a setting like that, and what do they like to do? Do they like to water? Do they like to have their hands in the soil? Do they like to be around animals? You know, do they enjoy being in a greenhouse and being around a lot of plants? Are those things that interest them at all? Even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, you know, we don't get hours and hours of farm work interest, but we get a lot of interest in specific tasks. And then what we see frequently is people kind of owning tasks they really enjoy and feel comfortable with, and gravitating to doing that when they return. So I think getting to know your child, getting to know the gardening and resources in your community is a great way to start. Come to see us if you are looking for some inspiration. You know, we're one way of doing it, but we're certainly open to visitors and sharing that. And then I think, there are lots of groups like Master Gardener programs that are beginning to look at how to make gardening and horticulture therapy more available in communities, particularly for seniors. And I think the intersection there in disability between seniors and younger adults with disabilities is a really fruitful one, to use the farming metaphor, a really fruitful one to bring people together. So I would say trying to find a horticulture therapist in your community, or somebody that is interested in doing therapeutic gardening. I think gardening is therapeutic. To me, that's redundant, but there are specific approaches, particularly for folks who have physical impairments, that can allow them to garden. And so I think there are, and you're actually inspiring me to maybe get some resources up on our website for that kind of thing, for folks that might be looking.
Can you think of any other resources that, to highlight for people?
Well, because we, as I mentioned, are a working farm, I think for if your child is in adulthood, I think understanding supported employment and the opportunities that exist to partner with an organization that does supported employment services. We have a number of people who work here at the farm and have worked in the past with us, and they come with an employment specialist that assists them while they're here, and they work on specific skills. And then they often, I've been a letter of reference for a number of young adults who have gone on to other employment because they had a chance to work here and they got to learn the basics in a comfortable and safe place. So I think learning those things. If there are recreational services, we're really fortunate here in Santa Cruz. We have a great organization called Shared Adventures that does a lot of different things recreationally for people with disabilities. And they host, we host their garden club every Thursday afternoon. So partnerships, finding places to collaborate so that not everybody has to recreate the wheel. I know there are also increasingly inclusive playgrounds being developed. I think it would be a really interesting thing to see inclusive playgrounds include some raised and roll into garden beds, so that folks could be involved a little bit in that, in the context of an inclusive playground. And even starting in your child's school. I've done some work a little bit here locally with groups that do garden classrooms and gardening in schools, and they're increasingly interested in finding out how they can include their special ed students in that process. So I think, to the extent that a school may have space for a school garden, how can you make that accessible to everyone? How can you get staff trained up a little bit so they can find ways to include people, in their classrooms starting as young kids? And I think we all, it's pretty non-controversial to have children learn where their food comes from, learn how to garden, enjoy being outdoors. I think there's consensus that that's really good for mental health and well-being. And so maybe starting, if your child's younger, starting at your school, and seeing if you can encourage that kind of thing. And if they're older, connecting with existing community gardens, and getting a plot, getting or doing it yourself in your own yard. But when we get this barn built, we hope to have a lot of activities here at the farm that will engage people, in that adult, an environment where we can hopefully have barn dances and potlucks and various things that may not be directly farm work related but can take place on our farm campus.
Well, that's fantastic. Rings a lot of bells with me. I grew up on a farm,
Oh, okay.
and
Great.
there's a lot of lessons to be learned
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah. And I should say our farm, because we're trying to engage people really in the practice of farming, and we don't want people sitting around watching a tractor do the farming, everything we do is on a hand scale. So we have some power tools, but we're so small scale. We have, just about 2 acres under cultivation. So it's essentially, can look and feel to a farm, to somebody who grew up on a farm, it would look like a big garden. But we do sell our produce directly to customers, and we do, as I said, have set ourselves up to be able to be a typical employment setting for folks with disabilities. And I think that's important.
Wow. Well, that's fantastic. That's the end of the this section. Back to you, Adia.
Yeah, and one of the things that I know you were going to ask, Dana, is how can others support you? Heidi, if we were looking to do something today to support all the work that you have going on at the farm, what is it that we can do? Can you tell us?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think if you're local or it's feasible for you, we rely heavily on volunteers. And those are volunteers with and without disabilities. But a lot of folks are working for companies now that give people release time, to do volunteer work for other nonprofits. We would welcome that. We've been hosting a few groups here and there from corporations that want to have a team building day. And we get them out there, learning what it's like to really harvest strawberries or whatever. No, we don't want to make it too hard, but, give people that experience. So, through your company, through your employment, but also, bringing a family down on a Saturday workday to get an experience of who we are and what we do, and help us out on the farm directly. Of course, we're always, as a nonprofit, helped by any financial support that people can offer, but people can become customers. We sell a whole variety of what we call shelf stable products on our website. So jams, hot sauces, cocktail mixes, that are all made from our farm. Those are all ways, purchasing those products, certainly, that revenue goes right back into our programming.
Everything else sounded lovely except for you made strawberry harvesting sound like hell. So I have to ask you about that later. What that includes.
You'll appreciate why you spend so much for strawberries in the store after you've
Okay.
harvested. They are a high labor crop.
I will have to ask. I have so many questions. Oh, well, then that being said, thank you, Dana and Heidi. Thank you so much for this conversation, all the information. There's been already a question or two that's come in, but I want to give everyone a time and to put in their questions in the Q&A feature. And we'll be answering them on air. While I'm doing that, Heidi, you spoke a little bit about inclusivity within the community, and LSA is definitely we believe in that. It's our motto. It's the lifestyle that we try to practice here at LSA, at Life Services Alternatives. But you talked about it within inclusive playgrounds, and I just want to acknowledge for a second. It sounds like Olenka Villarreal is in the audience right now, who is the founder of Magical
Right.
That's right. And that little plug in there. Hi, Olenka. I just want to take the time to say, some of these things that you talked about within the community, within playgrounds, within, the school system and things like that, it really does sound like you parents of this generation are fostering or pushing ahead inclusivity itself. Are there other areas that you currently see the need for inclusivity? Any areas that you can think of that advocates like myself, if we were thinking outside of the box, why couldn't it be a magical bus station? I don't know, but are there any areas in which we're kind of thinking within a box and things need to change?
Right. Oh, that's a big question. That's a very big question. I mean, I'll just use the example. The sidewalks that lead up to our farm have light poles right in the middle of them that make it impossible for me to walk side by side with my son in a wheelchair, right? While he's in a power chair. So, it's ironic because here we are trying to create an inclusive farm that also is fully accessible. And yet the barriers just to get to us have to do with public policy and city planning, and I don't know what all, that make it problematic. So I do think you're right that parents are increasingly pushing this. And I can say from my own experience, we've had, Noah's experience has been filled with fabulous educators, really committed people who have taught us a lot, supported us in these endeavors. My son still has some lovely teachers back from elementary school who come to visit him and see the farm and see him in his new, in his own home. And those are people that were committed to inclusion before I probably even knew the word, honestly. He's 28 now. So But I think that if we're really, this is just me on my soapbox, but I think if we're really talking about inclusion, it does mean everything and everywhere and everyone, and I think that's ultimately the goal. That's what we're after, and not letting a disability preclude someone. My son, he has the farm, and everybody who lives here at Coastal Haven has the farm as an option, as an offering, I'd like to call it. But he's, 3 nights a week now in Santa Cruz. He's out in the community hearing live music at various places for free concerts. That's his, he loves music. If we lived over the hill, we'd be at Magical Bridge going to all those concerts, excuse me.
Yeah.
He loves that. But I think, increasingly the public being comfortable with that, being okay with folks with disabilities wanting to enjoy the very same things, because that's, it sounds so simple, but that's the bottom line, right? People with disabilities want the same things people without disabilities want in many cases, right? Enjoyment of their environment, being able to participate, feeling included, enjoying music, culture, restaurants, whatever it is, and not being limited. So I think when you see and observe things and you can advocate for someone with a disability to be included in that restaurant, to be allowed to participate in that public concert, to not be shoved off to the side, or not. I mean, I've literally had people, this is very rare, but I've had it happen where someone complained that my son's seat back was too high at a concert, that he was blocking their view. And this was a big outdoor venue with no reserve seating, and literally they didn't want to scoot their chair 12 inches over and I can't do anything about the height of his chair. It's a wheelchair. And he's not a very tall guy, but you get folks like that. But for every one of those people, in my experience, there are 4 or 5 people sitting around that will tell you right up front, I'm sorry that it just happened to you. Being one of those people that says, I'm sorry that happened, sometimes that can make the difference for a parent, in how they feel about as they work to integrate their child into our larger society in a way that really feels genuine.
I'm glad that you gave that juxtapose of ways to be an advocate besides just, because I was getting ready to get a picket and a sign and go outside and start protesting on something. I don't know, the street lights or street poles or something. But
Well,
compassion
that
is
too.
right. I hear compassion, and that's what I hear. Dana, you said you grew up on a farm. I saw you shaking your head back there. Give me a 1 or 2 ideas of what I can do as an advocate, someone who may not necessarily be a part of the community, but wants to advocate for the rights of IDD individuals and their families. You know, maybe it's inclusivity within our community, maybe it's at large. I know you're in the DDS task force. You used to be on the board of the Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired. There's a lot of hats that you're wearing within the community and advocating that you're not a part of. How can we be like you, Dana?
Well, I mean, I think Heidi said it so well when she said, to encourage a culture of inclusivity and also to, you know, craft programs around that. I think back to, our community inclusion training program. I mean, it's all based um, on getting out, you know, doing meaningful volunteer work together. And Joe, I think we all need to look for situations, that exist that could use a little bit of a boost in the way of accessibility. I think about you talked, Heidi, about community gardens. Well, gosh, I know here in Willow Glen next to the high school, there's one where you can be a gardener, right? You can get your own little spot, but many of them, I think, probably could use some encouragement to have more inclusive programs and to try and make sure they're accessible. And so we all should be looking for those kind of opportunities to be, as Alenka always says, ambassadors. Um, because there's a lot of room for making, what we do every day, more inclusive.
I love that. Well, let's get started on some of these questions. Thank you, Dana and Heidi, for answering my question. But I know that there's so many other people out here who have more questions in depth, especially about the care situation. Sarah Cole says, can you tell us more about the care situation since we are in a caregiver crisis in this area and throughout the nation? What are challenges you faced? What are solutions, experiences? Heidi, I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll move right over to you, Dana.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm an opinion of one and an experience of one, but I can say here in this setting, we've been working, Coastal Haven is a supported living services model, so an SLS model. And we have 3 different agencies that provide support to residents in our neighborhood. And those 3 agencies have to hustle, I would say because Sarah's absolutely right. There's a huge crisis and we don't have enough people. And, we can talk about policy measures that can make that different. I think our governor, I don't want any blowback because I'm not perfectly familiar with all these things, but I think our governor has done a lot to raise wages and to provide, additional financial support for folks in the in the supported living setting. Certainly we've seen it in IHSS with wages and benefits improving over the course of time, not as quickly as we would like. But I think that until we have career ladders and that career is respected for the value that it really brings and the expertise people have to do it well. And I don't quite know how you achieve that. I can say in Coastal Haven, it has been a high priority for us to create an environment that is conducive to the worker, to the support provider. It's not enough to be able to say our children have safe and stable homes if it's not a place that the people who replace us as parents want to be and want to work. And so I'm really happy to say, and I think Dana is going to have a lot more to say with a great deal more experience and success than we have. But I think that with LSA, but I think that, it's very encouraging to me to hear supported living agencies say that providers like to work at Coastal Haven. And I think there are a couple reasons for that. One is it is a beautiful natural setting, and we all as humans do better with that around. I just am convinced of it. The other thing is, I think we don't have providers working in isolation from one another. Our housing is shared housing, much like LSA. And so when individuals who need support are in a shared housing situation, that can add complexity, that can add difficulties and conflicts, but it also adds some camaraderie and opportunity for providers to have one another. And I think that's really important. And I get a chance to talk to providers on the farm who are coming to support a person with a disability who wants to volunteer here or work here. And, it's really important for them to have one another and have the chance to talk about their work, about what's working or not working with this person, or can we get in the car and go together somewhere? And then I've got company, my client has company, and everybody's happier. And, those sound like really simple things. They're not going to solve the caregiver crisis Sarah is asking about. But, within my power as a parent, what can I do? I have tried, and we have tried as family partners here to create an environment that is really healthy and happy for those providers. And we do little stuff. We have this little program called Blooms of Thanks that we grow really beautiful flowers here. I have to say, our farm manager has knocked it out of the park, and we give away bouquets every week. We put them on Main Street at Coastal Haven, and the bouquets are there to take home for free, saying thank you for what you do. I think acknowledging people and recognizing what they do within the power that we have, which isn't a lot. I can't do anything about their wages and their benefits. That's out of my control, but I can utilize the farm and its resources to give back to people and to, enlist people. And those are just, they chip around the edges of a much bigger problem, and I recognize that. But Dana, I think, has way more experience with
Well, I
that.
certainly would, echo what Heidi said. It's a complex problem. Um, you know, when I first came to LSA and we were trying to decide who we wanted to be when we grew up, we came to the conclusion that LSA had to be a great place to live and a great place to work. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to certainly, create a culture. Um, ours aren't houses, they're homes. And we're not just people, we're a family. And so making LSA a great place to work, helps. But in today's reality, people also they have to have wages and benefits. And frankly, the state's been real slow on the uptake in terms of competitive wages, or allowing providers to pay competitive wages. And, increasing the minimum wage ain't the answer, right? Because we don't want, we expect more out of the people that we hire to care and support. So yeah, that's a little disappointing that a little slow on the uptake. Um, uh, recently, the thrust is to implement higher rates in a new rate system, and I'm happy to report that the legislature uh, called the more than called the governor's bluff. He wanted to put it off for another year, and they said, they didn't use this word, but they said, hell no, we'll put it off for 6 months. So yeah, there is some hope, but I guess you just have to do it the old-fashioned way, try and, make those jobs attractive. We've doubled down on training, we've doubled down on recruiting. We work really hard to kind of return to a pre-pandemic kind of camaraderie. Um, but it's a tough and complex problem, and I think it was Sarah. I don't have a feeling it's any easier here than it is wherever you are. Um,
And it's a national problem, right? I mean,
yes,
this is the thing, is policy gets set at that level, and this is not a solution, but just to identify that until, this is again my, all biases right out there, but until we begin to prioritize people's lives and the quality of people's lives over the accumulation of private wealth, I think we're going to have this problem, because we're getting older as a society. More kids like mine didn't used to survive, and now they're living into adulthood and later adulthood,
yes,
creating an enormous demographic crisis. And our social policies and frankly our social priorities are not keeping up with that human reality. And so that's where your picket sign comes in, Hadia. And
I was just gonna say that. I was like, give me all the ammo that I need. Well,
yeah,
I just in time, like a superhero that she is, Olenka is coming with the tough questions. And so I have to ask this. Olenka says, I'd love to ask Heidi if she sees any opportunities to license her Common Roots model to either other communities or schools to learn what you have done in a replicatable way, so we could have more of your wonderfully inclusive experiences everywhere, kind of a Common Roots in a box type of thing, as a possible new revenue source too. So she's asking about franchising, essentially what you do. Is that a possibility?
I don't know, but I want to talk to Olenka about
Like I said,
I
the
think
superhero with the tough questions.
Yeah, no, I think in all seriousness, sure, sure, it would be a possibility, and I appreciate Olenka's creativity so much, you know, and I think we've been pretty head down here just trying to get it made. You know, we bought an empty field essentially, and now we've got a working farm on it. And now our sites, my board sites, are turning toward, you know, how do we sustain our model? How do we bring in revenue sources? Because you cannot make what I'm doing survive on the sale of tomatoes and cucumbers. You know, you've got to have other methods, and we are doing more than cucumbers and tomatoes. So I'm intrigued by that idea. I'm also, you know, to be honest, and it's just my and my husband's approach, you know, we've talked about wanting to be the open source version of what we did if it succeeded. Because I think parents in our situation, depending on their personal resources, but also depending on just their stamina after running the long race, you know, to care for somebody who is a dependent adult is so taxing and so challenging that I don't want to make it harder. And Olenka's not suggesting this, neither does she. She's made a lot of people's lives way better. And you know, I'm in that same camp of what can I do? You know, am I in a position to be able to make that easier, not harder on other families, so they don't have to recreate the wheel, they don't have to learn everything I had to learn? And could they benefit from that if this in fact is a thing they're interested in? So I think really for me, where the policy question comes in is a little bit like the caregiver question of, do we care enough? Do we want this enough in people's lives that what we do here at the farm, you know, what all these other settings do where our kids are included, are those things? And that's beginning to happen with self-determination and some other efforts at the regional center level. Are these things that are fundable? You know, my son can't belong to a gym because there's nothing he can do there physically. He has the use of one arm and hand, you know, but he can participate and sows thousands of seeds a year on my farm in a greenhouse, but that takes staff support. Is that a fundable activity for him? Does it matter to anyone else enough? You know, that's the kind of thing. And I just use him as an example, but hundreds of other people who could be doing that on our farm and are doing that, but where we can find a way to finance that, you know, as they grow food and help feed their community. Because that's what's happening here, right? It's not just people with disabilities receiving support. This is people with disabilities using their skills, their learning to feed their community. You know, we donate food. We're about to do some contracts with Second Harvest Food Bank. We are a production farm, and people with disabilities, you know, have a role in doing that. And so that's a little bit of what we're trying to be about too, is the paradigm shift. But Olenka, let's talk offline about franchising.
Glad to make the connection.
Curious.
Dana, I have the same question for you. I know we get this question a lot, and it's a LSA in a box model. Can we open source, like Heidi said? Is it possible to franchise the model? What do you see in LSA's future 20 years from now?
So, no, I mean, just, you know, my philosophy is it's already open. And I've spoken many, many times about what it takes to, you know, create a home. And, you know, for most people, it's a huge dose of medicine that says, wow, I'm leaving that to you. I cannot possibly, you know, do that. It's too much time, too much resources, expertise. Internally, we, you know, I mean, under my watch, we've gone from 3 to 16 homes. So we've done it a couple times. Well, we have what's called a cookbook. You know, and then the whole idea is that, you know, you're kind of writing stuff down and making sure that, you know, you have some institutional memory. Because there's a couple of us that have done this so many times that if we all got run over by a bus, you know, you'd lose a lot. So, yeah, I mean, I'm open to it, but it's not like it's going to be something that you could brand and charge money for. I guess where the rub is typically is, again, it takes a whole lot of resources to do. And, and that's, those resources are tough to find. Just like you think about what it took to buy all those houses. It kind of comes back to me, it's the community. I mean, it's for the community. It's done because of the community, and you can't do it unless people are involved. There just isn't. Government obviously has a lot of money and spends a lot of money, but there's really very little willingness to fund new homes, or even willingness to keep the rates, competitive, because they view that as not a priority.
Well, I know right now, Common Roots Farm, and LSA are literally like the rose that grew out of the concrete. You guys are forging a way where there really isn't a way, and you're making up and innovating new things every day and also setting a bar on what the future looks like for those who come behind you. And so for that reason, as an advocate, I want to say thank you. I know that there's a lot of love that is going into this community, but it's also setting people who are advocates with a different mindset, and helping a lot of families. That being said, there's just one more question. We're just at time. This one's for you, Heidi, and they want to know how many people are living on the farm. And I know it's adjacent to the farm, so can you make that distinction and then tell us how many are living there?
So right now there are 18 adults with disabilities living here, and we have room for 20.
Okay.
And there are 38 people living here
I love it.
on the Coastal Haven property. And you're correct, no one living on the farm, but right next to it. Yeah. So we have 9 homes and a common garage, and then next to that, a historic house that's being renovated that will eventually be rented, for probably an additional family or something. But yeah.
And Heidi, they're all living there and being supported by supported living through one of 3 agencies.
That's correct. Yep, that's right, Dana.
Very interesting. Well, thank you so much again for your time. We're just at time. Before you go anywhere, audience, I wanted to take the time to say thank you to Heidi and to Dana. And then I also wanted to encourage you, continue the conversation with Heidi. Her email is here, and it's also in the chat, hcartan@commonrootsfarm.org. Continue the conversation with her, and she's happy to answer any of your questions offline, she tells us. And I also want to thank you all for joining us. And I'm hoping you'll come back and join us next week. We're going to be meeting with Anna Wang, and she's the co-founder and vice president at Friends of Children with Special Needs. That's Tuesday, July 16th at 6:30. And that link is available both in our website, and then also we'll also drop it in the chat as well. Thank you so much for joining us again. And if you want to come and meet us in person and run with us, we have a race that's happening in September. It's on the 14th at 9 a.m. at Vasona County Park, and that's in Los Gatos. We are really excited to be doing this for our 4th year in a row. You can run, walk, roll, stroll, sprint, anything that you like, just join us. And the QR code's right on the screen, so scan that and be sure to get tickets so that we know you're coming. Thank you again for joining us. Please do connect and continue that conversation with us on all of our socials, because we'd be happy to hear from you. Thank you again, and I think that's it for tonight. Heidi, it's been wonderful having you. Dana, thanks for sitting in the hot seat again.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you all. I really enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful to folks. Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye. See you next week.
Yeah.